It has been over 400 days since the war in Gaza started. Since then, 1,200 people have been killed in Israel, nearly 44,000 in Gaza, including over 11,000 children. The devastation and destruction in Gaza is just near total, visible from space. Everywhere you look, there is rampant hunger and famine and disease. Now we're exactly 2 months away from Donald Trump returning to power. It has become abundantly clear that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been and is now biding his time until then. In the meantime, in an attempt to block the Biden administration providing more arms to Israel, a group of U.S. senators led by independent Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont is trying to stop the $20 billion sale of offensive U.S. weaponry to Israel, arguing that Israel has waged a war on the Palestinian people and that providing additional arms to Israel violates both international and, crucially, U.S. law.
The United States government cannot provide weapons to countries that violate internationally recognized human rights or block U.S. humanitarian aid. That is not my opinion. That is what the law says.
A partnership should be a two-way street, not a one-way blank check. And at a minimum, the Netanyahu government should comply with American law.
We must not continue to provide offensive weapons that make the United States complicit in the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinians, the injury of 100,000 more innocents.
Now, I should say this vote is still ongoing. We're looking at it live. Somewhat remarkably, and we should sort of level set here, this vote was not expected to get a majority. But so far, 18 senators have voted in favor of banning the sale of tank rounds, which is part of the package here. 19 senators have voted to ban the sale of high explosive mortar rounds. And just to give a context here, as we await the possibility of Senator Sanders joining us, though I don't know if he will be able to, because as you can see, that vote has not gavelled close, and his job is to vote. You see Mitch McConnell there talking on the floor. I want to read from the senator's op-ed today, speaking about the war efforts. He says, all of this is unspeakable and immoral, but what makes it even more painful is that much of the death and destruction has been carried out with U.S. weaponry and paid for by American taxpayers. During the last year alone, the United States has provided $18 billion in military aid to Israel and delivered more than 50,000 tons of armaments and military equipment. In other words, as Americans, we are complicit in these horrific and illegal atrocities. Our complicity must end. There was reporting yesterday that the White House had sent out a memo, a talking point, saying that a vote for this resolution would embolden Hamas and Hezbollah. And this is something that the senator responds to in the Washington Post as well. He says, I understand there are those who will argue that blocking these offensive arms sales will only embolden terrorist organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah, as well as their sponsors in Iran. I would respectfully disagree. You do not effectively combat terrorism by starving thousands of innocent children. You do not effectively combat terrorism by bombing schools and hospitals. You do not effectively combat terrorism by turning virtually the entire world against your country. Just for a little bit of context here, I believe we do now have the senator on the phone. Just for a little bit of context here, just to give people a sense of the scale of destruction that we've seen in Gaza over the past year, and it can be very difficult to communicate. It's something we've wrestled with. I want to just give a sense of children who die in conflict. Obviously, children are definitionally should be non-combatants and should not be targeted in war. In terms of the average number of children casualties, in the Ukraine war, for instance, we have a graphic that shows this. In the case of the war in Ukraine, Russian attacks there. Russian attacks in Ukraine. You see that 500 children have died per year in that war. During the Syrian war, which was one of the bloodiest and most catastrophic wars in recent memory, Bashar al-Assad, there were 4,700 deaths a year. And in Gaza, we have seen an unprecedented 11,000 deaths of children a year. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders now joins me by phone. Senator, thanks for joining us in the middle of this vote. What's your reaction to how the vote is going?
Well, given the kind of opposition we faced from the Democratic leadership, Senator Schumer, from the White House, from AIPAC. The fact that we got on one vote 19 U.S. senators, all within the Democratic caucus, to say, no, we're not going to give more money to Netanyahu to continue his horrific war against the Palestinian people. I feel pretty good about that.
How active were whipping activities by the White House, which put out a statement saying this is a bad idea, opposing it, saying that it would essentially benefit groups like Hamas and Hezbollah?
Well, I don't know exactly because they didn't quite call me up, but I can tell you that Senator Schumer was very active in AIPAC, which put $100 million into the last campaign, including defeating Democrats in primaries. They were very active as well.
I can't help but notice, as is often the case on votes like this, that while you did get 18 colleagues in the Democratic caucus, not a single Republican has voted for this, and I can't imagine a single Republican will. What do you think that augurs for what the posture of the incoming administration and Congress will be?
Well, I think the Republicans are making the bet that they will win Jewish support in this country. I'm not so sure they're right. According to a poll from J Street, 62% of the Jewish people that they polled oppose giving more money to Netanyahu unless he agrees to an immediate ceasefire. And by the way, I just don't think that the average American feels very good about putting billions of dollars into an Israeli government which is starving thousands and thousands of children. I don't care whether you're Democrat, Republican, progressive, conservative. I don't think people feel good about that. So I would say that the Republicans, they're making a guess. I think they're going to lose on that bet.
I want to ask you a question, and I don't want you to betray any confidences, so you can sort of speak in general terms, but I can't help but note there are votes here in support of your resolution that wouldn't have necessarily been there 3 or 6 months ago. I think it's fair to say there are more votes now than there would have been. And can you characterize to what you attribute that movement in the conversations you've had with your colleagues?
I think growing frustration with the fact that we are putting billions of dollars into Netanyahu. We have always had conditions on military aid. If you want U.S. military aid, you cannot starve children. You cannot bomb schools. And I think the American people and members of the Democratic caucus are seeing Netanyahu take the money and reject every proposal coming from the Biden administration or anybody else to protect civilian lives. So I think that is the bottom line as to why we're seeing more and more opposition to military support for Israel.
Senator Bernie Sanders, who's led that floor effort today that we've been covering. Thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate it.